Hi, this is Paul at PATools, and in this video we're going to be looking at the macros within the PATools Excel Toolbox. Those of us who are old enough to remember the days of Lotus 1, 2, 3 macros, Quattro Pro macros and so on, will remember that we used to use them a great deal and they were quite powerful and quite useful tools. Microsoft Excel came along, and rather than having macros on worksheets, they had a Visual Basic in the background, which is actually far more powerful than the macros used to be, and it's a fantastic tool, but it's also quite complex and you have to learn it and learn how to use it. So we have brought back into Excel macros in a similar sort of format to what they used to be, which basically allows you to manipulate your data within Excel in quite a powerful way, but using just a few basic commands. And doing it in the workbook. So we're going to look here first of all at a simple demo, and then we'll look at a slightly more complex one afterwards. So I've got a table of sales data here, and this might be, for example, a sort of report that we get on a daily basis coming in with new numbers in each day, and where we want to split it up into quarters and see what the quarterly totals are. So it might be that we basically want to come over here, we want to insert a column over here for March, same here, the same over here, and then we want to put in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 and some totals down here. We may want to add these up as well. And as I say, if you're doing this on a daily basis, then it's going to be quite time consuming to have to do this yourself. So we will write a macro to do it. Let's start with the basics. The basics of writing a macro in Excel is that use the first column in your macro to tell Excel where to go. So in our example here, we're going to go to J1 here. So we just simply type in there J1. And it's not case sensitive, so it can be uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. We're then going to insert a column. And to do that, we put in a command. And the command is INS for insert. And then the first parameter is a C for column. So that's telling it to go to J1 and insert a column. Now, to know what all of these are and how to use them, you basically open up macros here and click on help down the bottom here. And that will take you to a web page which we'll keep up to date, which has this video and also has all the commands listed out and the parameters and how you use them. So, in a nutshell, we do this. So we've gone to J1. So now we're going to go across to July and insert a column here. So we go to M1, I'll put it in capitals, I'll put this in capitals just to show you, I'll put this in lowercase, doesn't matter, I'm going to insert a column. And then we go to P, and I'm going to do this one slightly differently. I'm going to say P to P, insert, like that. And because I've selected a whole column, insert will tell it to insert a column. So that has written the macro, it's as simple as that. Now we just got to identify it as a macro. So to do that, we either select the whole thing or we select the first cell, which is normally the best way to do it, because later on you may want to add to this and so on. It just needs to mark the top left hand corner of the macro, and the name needs to start with the word macro. After that you can have whatever you want. You can't use spaces in named ranges, so I'm going to do insert columns like this. Enter, macro insert columns. So that's now a named range, this particular cell. But because it starts with the word macro, when we click on macros here, it appears here, macro insert columns. So we can run that macro, and let's see what happens. So I'll click on run, and you get a warning that there's no undo, and you can see it's pretty much done what we wanted it to do, except there was a mistake, because of course it's not put the columns in the right places. And if we go back and have a look, you'll see why. Basically we say go to J1, that's fine, and insert a column. Then we say go to M1, because M1 has now moved because of that column. It's now N1, isn't it? So we need to change this to be N1. And then of course once we go to N1 and insert a column, P to P has now become R to R. It's moved 2 across, so R to R. and this, instead of being R to R, instead of this being N1 for example, could be N28. It doesn't matter. Just it's going to insert a column. It's going to go to N28 and then insert a column. So it doesn't matter really where it goes to, as long as it's somewhere in column N. So let's just rerun this now and see if that works as expected. And this is really how macros work. You build them up gradually and you keep running each bit and trying it and checking it. So macros, insert columns. The @ sign at the beginning tells you that this is a macro that exists within the workbook. The one that doesn't have an @ sign is one that's stored separately. We'll look at that in a moment. So I'm going to do yes. And now it's nicely split up for us into quarters. And of course the last thing that we had selected was R to R, and that's why the whole column R is lit up and selected. So now, having done that, we may want to build on this macro. And a macro, by the way, basically starts where the named range begins, and it just works its way down until it comes to a blank cell, and then that's the signal that the macro is finished. So if I wanted a comment in there, you can, or something that looks like a blank line, I can put a semicolon in like that. Or I can put semicolon and then now do totals like that, so I can comment my macro for myself to help me with editing later on. So now I'm going to go, next thing I want to do is to go to J5 and add these three together. So I go J5, I'm going to enter something into the cell, and what I'm going to enter is equals sum of G5 to I5, like that. And don't worry that it shows 1545, because what's in there is this formula, equals sum. What I often do, and what you may have to do sometimes anyway, is to force that to be text, and then you can see actually what it looks better to read. So having done that, I'm then going to go to J5 and I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to paste. And where am I going to paste? J6 to J28. Okay, J5 copy, J6, J28 paste. There are other things you can do. Instead of repeating J5, I could just put a dot in there. That means whatever's selected stays selected, go to the same, don't change. Or I can put SEL, stands for selection, my selection. So this might have been J5 to J20 or something, but so let's run this macro now. Macro insert columns, and the cursor can be sitting anywhere. I'll just go and tidy this up ready, and we'll run the macro insert columns, and lo and behold, it's inserted the columns. In J5 it's entered our formula, adding those three up, and then it's copied that all the way down. So each of these adds up its relevant area. And you can see now how I could easily just copy this, go there and paste, go there and paste, go there and paste. And then here I could enter Q1, so I could go to J4. So I go to J4, enter Q1, and then go to N4, enter Q2, for example. And then I could put a sum formula in here and copy that all the way across as well. So you're beginning to see now how that works, how a fairly simple sort of macro using fairly simple commands can very quickly come in and tidy up our data. So let's just run it one last time. Insert columns, and you can see it's put in Q1 and it's put in Q2. It's done all of that formatting for us again. And you could, if you want to, we could go then to J5 to J28, J5 to J28, font equals, and then put in a B for bold. Here, as I say, to learn what these commands are and to learn what parameters and options there are, just look at our web page from the help button. So let's go and try that again. I have to delete all this. This is how writing macros works. You just keep going through it again and again, or you pick it up, you give this another name. You could call this on here macros age 2, and then you can obviously just run it from stage 2 onwards. So we'll go macro, insert columns, and by the way, double clicking on it runs it, so you don't have to come over here and click run. Do yes, and you'll see that it's made that all bold. So there is a simple example of a macro, and you can see how you can start to manipulate your data and tidy it up. Now if this was a report you received on a daily basis, of course, you wouldn't have this macro stored inside here. So the next thing we need to do is look at where we would have it stored. Now we could store it on a separate sheet, so I'll just show you that. I'm going to copy that over here. I'm going to rename this sheet macro library. You don't have to, but it's tidy. Put it at the end perhaps. And now I can I can delete that lot there. But this is still called macro insert columns. So if I go to formulas, name manager, macro insert columns, I'm going to edit that, and I'm now going to point it to here. So there it is, macro insert columns over here. And if I come back to the sheet, just to see that running, to show that the macro can be stored anywhere in the workbook, and it doesn't have to be in column A, B and C. You know, you could have another one over here, you could have one here, wherever you want. So I go back to macros, you see macro insert columns is there, do yes, and just run it on that sheet, even though the macro itself is stored elsewhere. So that's the joy of macros. The final thing is you may actually want, of course, if this was a report being sent to you every day, then you wouldn't be able to store it in the macro library in another sheet anyway. So what we can do is we can take this and select it as we wish. And by the way, macros at the moment will only ever use up to 5 columns. The range or process command, the command that you want to run, and then up to 3 lots of parameters. That's all on our website. So if I go to macros here now and go add, and I'm prompted to enter a name, so I might want, and this doesn't have to begin with the word macro either, so I can call this my new macro, for example, my new macro. Do OK, and you'll see it's picked up that range, put it in here, and I'll do save. And now my new macro exists independent of the workbook. So if I go and delete that sheet and go back to my simple demo and just get this ready, then I can go to the formulas, the name manager, and of course this one now points to an error because I deleted the sheet, so I can delete that named range completely. And now when I come back to PATools macros here, it's gone, but my new macro still exists, so I can just run that and it runs it in there. So I can store my macro completely separate from the workbook. It is handy to build it up in the workbook and then copy and paste it into here, but if you know what you're doing, you can edit it. Basically each of these has a tab character, so you use the tab character on your keyboard to move across. Okay, so I could edit this. I could have this, change this to be quarter 1, quarter space 1, like that. Save. And so if I come back in, so this Q1 now should say quarter 1 when I run it. So macros, my new macro, yes, close, and let's put in quarter 1. So similarly, if I want to work on the macro and I'm not happy editing it in here, I can come and edit. If I do Control A to select everything and Control C to copy, then close that down and close it down, I can come into a workbook and do Control V to paste, and I've got it all in here. I can edit it in here, so I could make that into quarter 2, for example. So this isn't a macro that's identified because it hasn't got a named range yet, but I could easily now just go back and copy that again, for example, back into macros, my new macro, edit, Control A, delete, Control V to paste, and now we've got 1/4 in there, and save. So where are these stored? These are basically simple text files, and they are stored, and therefore you can edit them as text files if you want to do it outside this even, and they're stored in the subfolder for where you install the PATools Excel Toolbox. So if you want to find where that is, you can go to More, About, go to Tools, and open the Install Data folder here, and that will open a folder. You probably can't see it on here, and there's a folder there called MA for macros, and in there there's one called M for macros. We will look now at the longer demo, and here I've written a macro that basically creates this whole thing over here. So I'm going to just delete all of that for the moment, and let's just run this macro. It's called macro create sales table, macros with the @ sign because it's in the workbook. So I'm just going to run that, and let's see it run. It's got a user prompt for cell I5, so I'm going to enter number 1 in there, and it's finished running the macro, and it's created this whole thing here for me. Let's have a quick look, not detailed, but a quick look at what it does. First of all, it goes G to Z and deletes. So it selects G to Z like that and does delete, clears everything. Then it goes to H1 and enters my company name. So let's just change that to MyCo. It goes to H1, the font is bold. Then it goes to H1 and it does an auto width, which is like double clicking here to make it fit. Then it goes down 2. So we were on H1, so it now goes down 2, down there. So you don't have to specify H3, you can just say go down 2. And then it enters sales by region. And the same selection, the font becomes bold, so it makes that bold. Then we go down 2. So 1 and 2, go down to there. And we start a counter. And the counter starts at number 1 and increments by 1. Now the next bit repeats 12 times until it comes across a repeat slash like that to tell it to stop. So everything inside this repeat loop repeats. So remember we were here, so it now says go down 1 and enter region and the counter. And the counter started at 1, so it'll enter region 1. And it's going to repeat this 12 times, so it then goes down 1 more cell, enters region 2, and so on, region 3. So it's going to enter region 12 without a gap, it's going to go all the way down. Then we say go to H12, which is here, and insert. So it's going to go and insert. Now we haven't got any of this over here yet. This doesn't yet exist in the macro, so it's going to just go and insert and move these down. Then in the I5, it's going to enter something, and it prompts the user, what do you want to enter in there? I did number 1 just now. Then it starts a counter at number 2, repeating, incrementing by 2. And this bit repeats 5 times. Goes right 1, so it goes across 1 and enters equals I5 plus, which we've just put in on the prompt, plus the counter. So that's going to be equals I5 plus 2. Then it's going to go right again because we're repeating right 1, and now it's going to be I5 plus the counter started at 2, has gone up by 2, so the counter is now 4. So it's going to be equals I5 plus 4. Then it's going to go over here equals I5 plus 6, and so on. Then it does a number format onto that range, I5 to N5, in the format month number. And then on these 3 cells, it makes the fill color blue. And on the same 3 cells, because a dot means the same selection, or I could have in there cell, doesn't matter, the font color is going to be white. It then goes from these to this range here, I6 to O19, and applies a number format like that, and then on I19 it enters equals the sum of I6 to J18. On the same cell it does a copy and then it pastes it down here. Then we go to F1, which is this cell up here, and does a copy, goes to O5 and pastes the format. On the same selection, so still on O5, it enters the word total, then O5 it copies, H19 it pastes, Then O6, it enters a formula equals sum of I6 to N6. O6 it copies, pastes across that range. I6 to N18, it then enters random numbers, fills that whole range, each cell with a random number from 1 to 99. I12 to O12, it then clears. So let's just run the whole thing, and we'll look at the very end of it in a moment. Create cells table, yes. So there's the prompt. What do we want in I5? I'm going to enter number 2 this time. Close. So in I5 we put number 2, then it formatted it to read month 2. Then this is I5 plus 2, and that's I5 plus 4, I5 plus 6. If you remember the counter incrementing by 2. And then we get to a final bit at the bottom here where we're saying we're going to go to O19, and if it's greater than 3000, which it is, then we go to O21 and we enter above target, and we complete the if. So if that had been less than 3000, it would have gone to O21, but it would not have entered above target. It would have said, I'll go to O21, but the if statement's false, so I'm not going to do anything. Then I say go to O19, and if it's less than 3001, enter below target, end the if. And finally O21, it does an auto width, so that's making it fit. So if I change this now to be if greater than 5000, and if it's less than 5001, now chances are it's now going to be below target. These are all filled with random numbers between 1 and 99, but let's see. And by the way, I don't like these blue, I want them to be red, so I just change the fill color to R for red. Let's run this macro. Oops, clicked the wrong thing. Macros. Create sales table. Yes. I'm going to enter number 1 this time, and you'll see these are now red. And it does indeed say below target because it's below the 5000. So you can begin to see a few more slightly more complicated things in the macro. You can do an awful lot of things, and I'm sure in time we will be adding more. Let us know if you come across something that you would like added. So that is the macros. The next thing to show you is formulas in here. So I'll just open up another demo. I've got here formulas demo. Just put that inside so you can see it. Now here's another sort of example again of a sales table of data that we receive, and it may be that we want to actually do something like this to it. We want to add totals for each row, we want to add totals for each column, and then I want to actually see some specific regions picked out, 2, 10, 11, 12, 18 and 23. I want those added up, and I want another set added up here, and then I have to go and find a factor on a factors table over here and apply a factor for the month, 90% for January, and then over here I'm going to be multiplying that by the factor, and this one here I'm going to be multiplying that by the factor, and then these are the numbers I'm interested in. So if this report especially comes from a third party and you can't have all of this added in, how do you do it? Well, we've just seen macros, and you could write a macro and store it independently and just play it to add in all of this stuff and format it. But there is another way, and if I just show you, I'm going to just make a copy of that sheet over there, report 3. I'm going to delete the bit that comes to me. Obviously all these formulas have gone to 0, but that's fine. And I'm going to shade in all of this area here. And I'm now going to go into macros, formulas. I'm going to add. And I'll give it a name, which is add my analysis, let's say. And you'll see, because I've shaded that in, it's picked up everything that's in there, and it's just created a simple thing. O2 has totals, O3 has a formula in that reads equals sum of C3 to N3, etc., etc., like that. I'll do save. So add my analysis. So now, next time I receive my report like this, I can just go macros, play the formulas, add my analysis. And lo and behold, it's added in all of those formulas for me. That's a sum formula. That's a sum formula. This is looking up on the factors table, etc., etc. That's adding up those. So basically, it's stored for me from here. Every non-blank cell it's stored, whether it's got text in it or whatever was in it, formula, text like this. What you'll have noticed, of course, is it hasn't done any formatting. That is just simply a store of formulas. So you could then run a macro to format it nicely, or you could create the whole thing in a macro from the beginning. You've got options, but adding these formulas can be quite useful, especially if it's sort of quick and dirty. Oh yes, I just want to know what those two numbers are today, and then I'll close it and delete it and lose it, and I'll run the same thing tomorrow. So that is the formulas, and with all of these things you can rename them, and they you can have up to 9 different groups of them. So group 2, there's nothing in there. Go back to group 1, and if I right click on it, I can rename it. I can rename this as my favorites, for example. So you can rename the groups, and the same applies to macros. I've renamed this one my macros, but if I right click on it, I can call it group, if I can type, group A. It's now called group A. Final thing to say is you've got the same sort of thing on text files, and this is really just for you to store text, so there's no play button at all over here. So if I had something like this one here and I wanted to edit it, and I wanted to just make a note of this bit here because I particularly like that formula, I might want to use it somewhere else, I can go back to here and I can just add something, and I could say it's my formula that I like, and this is just a simple text file that I can save. My formula, I can edit it anytime, and I love to use this one. Save. Okay. The one thing I didn't show you is on macros there is also a check button here as well as run, which basically does a sort of syntax check on the macro. So it does a dry run without actually changing anything. So it goes to insert a column but doesn't actually insert it. It goes to make something bold but doesn't actually make it bold. So it doesn't change your data in any way, but it tests out the macro. It's not a guarantee it's going to do what you expect it to do. It's not a guarantee that it'll run perfectly, but it does at least give you an opportunity to sort of run a syntax check and see if it falls over somewhere. And I'll just show you that if I close this one down, if I just, I'm going to deliberately go back to, where are we? Nope. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Do you remember this one? This macro was called tidy up sales data into quarters, was it? Or my new macro, I think we called it, yep. So I'm going to just come over here and deliberately make a mistake. I'm going to put the word insert in there. Save. So when I try and run this macro, it will say unknown or misspelt command at line 1, J1 insert. It doesn't recognize that and it just stops running. So the correct command is ins, not insert. It doesn't matter, as I say, whether it's capitals or not, like that. So that is macros. Very powerful, very easy to create, very easy to play with, but macros do take time to play with. You will make the silly mistakes like I made at the beginning where you forget that the range has changed. You can use other tools, so for example, having inserted a column at J1, instead of saying go to N1, we could have said go 3 to the right, right 3, and then insert a column. So you'll find that there's lots of options there. As with most programming, there is not generally only one way to do it. There is not a right way. There are various ways of achieving the same outcome. Some are better than others for various reasons. Like that one, you know, sometimes saying go right 3 and insert a column, go right 3 again and insert a column it'll always put it in the right place. And even if you move this sales table across, start in a different place, you've then only got to edit that one initial command in the macro. So have fun, play with macros, get them to do what you want, and I hope that you benefit from them. Thank you for watching.